4 African countries experienced devastating floods that killed 25 times more than Hurricane Heavy, which was a once-in-a-500-year storm. Year 2018 was marked by record droughts, with 55% below normal rainfall, especially in the southern African region. The result was a decline in performance in agricultural and tourism sectors that led to a 1.1% shrinkage in GDP and over 21,000 jobs lost. Before the region could recover, 2019 rolled in with 2 major tropical cyclones in close succession. I'm talking of Cyclone and Kenneth that caused a trail of losses with over 600 fatalities and over 1.7 million people affected with damages exceeding $3 billion. Almost simultaneously, the East African and the Horn of Africa region was experiencing droughts that destroyed farmlands, the main source of food and livelihood for over 80% of the population. These droughts have an estimated 15 million people in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. Deteriorated farmlands and pastures causing a spike in food prices of up to 20%. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a common thread in all these challenges I have explained is the elephant in the room of climate change. And if it is left unaddressed, it is said to exacerbate these disasters and has been projected to shrink African economies by up to 75%. But just as rain does not fall on one roof alone, 2020 started on yet another disastrous note and is said to go down in history as one of the most unprecedented in recent memory. For over 10 months, the entire globe has battled the COVID-19 health emergency. The negative impacts of this catastrophe has exceeded by over 60% the devastation of the historic 2008 global financial crisis. But in no places are these losses more real than in people's pockets across the entire African continent, than in dinner tables and kitchen shelves. But even more alarming is the fact that these COVID-19 related stresses are coming in to exacerbate already less than ideal socioeconomic challenges in the continent. I was speaking today, 257 million African citizens go to bed hungry with their stomach aching of hunger. As we are speaking today, Africa needs to create no less than 13 million jobs each and every year in an economy that is already 20 times less productive than competitors in the global economy. Amidst these stark realities of risk, one critical question that we all need to answer today is how can biosecurity define its niche in a crowded space of emergency priorities already confronting the African continent? Whether you're talking climate change, you're talking food insecurity, you're talking emergency, health emergency, like COVID-19 and others that will emerge, it all starts with an insightful African proverb for us to start defining how we can solve this, that a cow that bellows does so for all cows. Biosafety solutions need to be driven in the context of combating climate change and rebuilding better under the COVID-19 realities. Cumulatively, biosafety risks, especially plant biosecurity, cause the entire community over $400 billion in damages each and every year. Africa takes a fair share of these damages, primarily through proliferation of unsafe food. We must ask ourselves why this is so, despite the robust provisions and regulations that we have had now for several years in the continent. 20 years ago, when the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety was open for signing in Nairobi, a resounding response was recorded from Africa. As we speak today, the protocol has come into force in more than 48 out of 54 African countries in the continent, including Nigeria. In domesticating this protocol, most African countries have biosafety policies. They have regulations and strategies. Nigeria has the National Biosafety Management Agency Act of 2015 to domesticate the protocol. This act established the National Biosafety Management Agency, a timely institution to regulate production practices and processes, as well as procedures, and ensure what ends up on the consumer table is safe and free from all adverse impacts to human health and the environment. While each country in the continent has its own laws, legal traditions, and practices, there are more similarities than differences among countries in the African continent. However, despite these provisions, the risk continues to mount, especially in our food systems. Nigeria already loses up to about 3.8% of our GDP to biosafety risk linked to farming. And nowhere is this more prevalent than in our urban areas. And in the entire sub-Saharan African region, urbanization is occurring at a rate that is almost double the world's average. With these transitions comes an increase in food demand and a rise in urban farms and informal food traders. For example, up to 90% of supply of leafy vegetables in some African cities is sourced from urban farms and supplied through informal traders. This is critical not only in driving food security, but also creating primary and supplemental income opportunities. But amidst these opportunities are some very critical safety threats. For example, use of wastewater, which is free to irrigate urban farms, especially during dry season, is prevalent. Urban farmers doing this, however, earn income estimated to be up to 50% above minimum wage, as they can sell vegetables as above double the price of the wet season. This, combined with practices such as unsafe, unregulated use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, is increasingly exposing many consumers. We are talking of a notable increase in microbial and heavy metal contamination on food consumed in our urban areas. Persists for another 1 to 2 decades. What the science is telling us is that vegetables raised in some of these urban gardens will be totally unsuitable for human consumption. And this includes in Nigeria as well. This is a serious threat to Africa's biosafety efforts, especially considering that incomes are being made by actions that exacerbate the continent's biosafety risk. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the extreme events already exacerbated by the changing climate will also continue to compound Africa's biosafety risk. What we already know, and what we are seeing even visibly year after year, is that the changing climate brings with it shifting climate patterns with highly variable seasons. For example, data shows that drought incidences have increased frequency from once every 20 years in the 1950s and 1960s to once almost every year now. Not only is this variability experienced in extreme events, but in ordinary seasons as well. For instance, cereal crops, which were traditionally harvested in the dry season and would therefore be dry using open sun drying across communities in the African continent, are now harvested at peak rainy seasons because of shifting seasons. Inadequate drying results in loss of quality in the form of pests and mold infestation, and at worst, aflatoxin poisoning, whose long-term exposure has been linked to liver cancer. As grave as this reality sounds, solutions also abound. For instance, training and correct use of affordable solar dryers, which is a climate action solution that can dry produce even under rainy season, has been shown to cut aflatoxin by up to 53%. But just as an arrow that has not entered deeply is not hard to remove, these biosafety challenges are not exotic, they are solvable. But to solve them, we must answer these 3 fundamental questions. And the first is, how can we leverage on climate action solutions to drive tangible solutions to Africa's biosafety challenges? And the second, how can Africa as a continent leverage their efforts to rebuild back better to drive biosafety in Africa's food system? And last, how can this rebuilding leverage on youth as critical component of capital? Because as we're speaking today, 60% of the entire African population is youthful, and 60% of this population is unemployed. But we know that Africa, being the most youthful continent, have the youth as their sovereign asset. We cannot ignore them in the solutions to address the biosafety challenges in the continent. But in answering these questions, I have 4 takeaways for you. The first is that we cannot address biosafety issues in a continent that have over 80% of its population in the informal sector. We cannot ignore them. We need to relook biosafety through the informal sector. Africa's urban centers suffer the scourge of food-based biosafety risk. I talk of urban-based informal food traders who supply up to 90% of leafy vegetables that are grown in risky conditions. If we are to combat the biosafety-driven food risk, the focus must be on this sector and have the players incentivized to take lead in implementing biosafety enablers. But the big question is, how do we incentivize people who are unable even to put food on the table? Yet they depend on some of these unsafe practices to make a living. Among critical incentives is availability of already markets that pay a premium for certified biosafety food. Another is accessible, affordable financing that we need to make sure that at least every policy should be able to enable these people who don't even have bank accounts to have access to finance. These must be tied to safety production practices. And the last aspect that we need to discuss is availability of affordable alternative inputs and technologies to enable this informal sector to take up safe production practices. And that takes me to the second point, which is compliance to standards must be made to be lucrative and accessible. We need to appreciate that complete implementation of the law can only happen within a willing mindset. When people are not willing, they will not be able to take up what is already there. If you take the example of traffic lights, yes, people still run through them. This means that complying with the law must become second nature to people before we can claim any success. And for this, there must be positive incentives for people to implement the already existing standards in countries. They implement the law. One of them is making compliance both lucrative and accessible. These informal sector traders reveal a key requirement to ensure compliance with biosafety standards is availing practical alternative approaches to substitute the unsafe practices. What this needs to happen is to have regulators adopt climate action solutions that are non-polluting, non-chemicalized, and safe for human and environment, as well as health, to become critical tools for achieving compliance. Use of nature-based solutions, simple ecosystem-based adaptation approaches such as organic fertilizers or biofertilizers, among others, for on-farm cultivation and accessible and affordable clean energy solutions. They do exist and they've proven to work. These are low-hanging fruits that can be leveraged. Use of ecosystems approaches have scientifically been proven to increase yields by up to 128% under the changing climate and result in food with better immune-boosting micronutrients. Affordable clean energy solutions of solar dryers, where youth are already developing across the entire African continent, have proven to dehydrate food up to 48 times faster than open sun drying, and do so under hygienic conditions to prevent growth of dangerous aflatoxins. Availing these affordable solutions, this is not rocket science. This is not magic. This is logic. It is happening in the continent. It's just a matter to make this the norm and not the exception, and provide this as a practical means by which producers can affordably meet food safety, health, quality, and environmental sustainability. And that takes me to the third point. We must inculcate traceability and accountability. It is critical to ensure accurate labeling. Every bunch of green leafy vegetables, for example, that we pick up at any local informal trader must be accounted for on how it was cultivated, on how it was farmed, to ensure it is free from dangerous contamination resulting from unsafe practices. And here we must leverage local communal structures to inculcate this accountability and traceability. I have never understood this, why Africa doesn't leverage on what has worked. In every community in this continent, there are communal cooperatives. We grew up seeing them. We see our mothers engage in this in the communities, raising little money. And to trace what each one in those communities or in those cooperatives were doing was quite very, very easy. Because as I said, nearly all these informal food traders are members of a local community cooperative. It is through these cooperatives that they pool resources to raise capital for their enterprises. The structure of these cooperatives needs to be leveraged to offer structure for traceability and accountability that can be relied upon by national standard bodies. Through such, these cooperatives can become not only centers for pooling resources and mobilizing capital, but also checking members to ensure compliance to safe food production techniques like the climate action solutions of shared solar dryers, leveraging fertilizers, and using EBA and ecosystem-based adaptation approaches. This can be done. This is happening, but must be made the norm and not the exception. And that takes me to the last point. Africa's youth must be empowered. Empowering the youth to be providers of the affordable tools needed to drive compliance is very, very crucial. The safer production approaches, be it organic fertilizers in place of chemical ones, or solar dryers for safe value addition, or rainwater harvesting equipment that can be gotten, all present enterprise opportunities that we can be able to engage and equip our youth and guide them to develop and deploy to the informal food producers and traders to achieve compliance. This is already happening across the entire African continent, where through a structured guidance we call innovative volunteerism, we're leveraging this approach to inspire youth in Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Cameroon, many other African countries. Here, youth have been guided. And they are developing mechanical solar dryers that are up to 200% cheaper than imported alternatives, yet just as effective because they use locally available material. So they're providing climate action solutions to address a very fundamental issue in a continent. And as they're doing so, they're also reducing post-harvest losses that cost the continent $48 billion each and every year. These dryers have proven effective in achieving moisture content, benchmarks set by the National Bureau standards in each and every country to prevent growth of aflatoxin, to prevent growth of mold and other fungi that are the core of unsafe food. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a holistic approach, a system-thinking approach to address the biosafety risk and challenges in the continent. It cannot happen in a vacuum. It must happen within the context of the realities of the challenges we see, more so exacerbated by the changing climate. We're talking of COVID-19 today, emergency. Yes, other emergencies will come, and climate change will make them worse. So do not call the forest that shelters you a jungle. This African proverb reminds us that while informal food actors are among the leading perpetrators of biosafety risk in our food system, they still supply up to 90% of what is consumed in our cities and communities. Rather than banish them, we have a real opportunity to work with them in devising very effective practical solutions to the risk that we face. We have the tools, we have the knowledge. Now let us apply them and truly make biosafety a reality in the continent. Thank you.
Together again, that was a fantastic presentation by Dr. Richard Munang. Dr. Richard Munang is UNEP African Regional Climate Change Program Coordinator. Thank you very much, Doctor. Just before we let you go, I'd like to find out if anyone has any question. Doctor is still available to answer questions on the presentation he's just made. Well, I always say whenever you're done with the presentation and there are no questions, I think the message really did get through loud and clear. Thank you once again, Doctor, for your contribution. I mean, no doubt,
thank you.
Climate change clearly does add a layer of complexity to forecasting and controlling biosecurity risks and its impact. Just as he has said, it is a major factor that facilitates the spread of pests, weeds, and diseases. We cannot run away from it. It's just like what we're talking about all day. When we talk about biosecurity, the focus isn't just on humanity itself. Humanity does not exist in a vacuum. It's in everything that we have to relate with, everything that we need to survive. And clearly from the presentation you have made, here today, Doctor, it will surely require a revision of current biosecurity practices, such as our preparedness, prevention, containment policies, and just like he has also said, surveillance response, and much more. It's COVID-19 today. We might hear something else in a few months or in a couple of years. But the thing is, whatever comes our way, we cannot close our ears or our eyes to the importance of climate change and how this affects our world today. Let's move on to the next presentation we have this morning, and this is on infection prevention and control. And Niniola Williams, Managing Director, DRASA, is here to give her presentation. Please put your hands together for her. It's a long walk here. I say that all the time.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to stand on existing protocol. My name is Niniola Williams. I'm the Managing Director of Dr. Amail Stella Adadebo, or DRASA Health Trust, and I'll be speaking on infection prevention and control. Next slide, please. So this is the outline of what I want to speak about today. I'll start by talking about what IPC is, infection prevention and control. I'll speak about how IPC was used as a core part and is still being used as a core part of the COVID-19 response in Nigeria, specifically using examples from Lagos State. And I will also speak about lessons learned and the way forward. So what is IPC? IPC is a science and a practice. Now, a lot of times when people talk about IPC, they think it means that we're training health workers, or we're wearing our personal protective equipment, or we're washing our hands. But in fact, IPC is much more complicated than that, and it is in fact a science and a practice. And what I mean by that is that it requires a certain level of expertise, and it is multidisciplinary. It includes aspects of engineering and design, aspects of physics, of course it includes microbiology. It's multidisciplinary. An IPC expert should be able to walk into this room now and identify all the risks of transmission of any pathogen. Whether they'll look at things like the airflow and the ventilation, they'll look at the movement of the people, they'll look at the items that we're sharing, they'll be able to do an assessment and identify risks and provide solutions to mitigate those risks. Also, IPC is not a vertical program. So often when we talk about IPC in Nigeria, we talk about IPC for specific things. So IPC for viral hemorrhagic fevers like Ebola and Lassa fever, or IPC for HIV, or IPC for COVID-19. But in fact, IPC is meant to be a horizontal program that cuts across all pathogens and biosecurity threats. At the end of the day, IPC is about creating a safe environment, and it requires a certain level of expertise, which I'll speak about. So I want to share some data with us. In 2016, there was an assessment done of 64 countries. It showed that those 64 countries, some of which included those that had just about recovered from the Ebola outbreak, only had a 19% capacity in IPC, infection prevention and control. And that's looking at the facility level. So when we talk about health facilities. And among the low and middle income countries included in this number, it was even worse. Only 2 of the 38 were considered to have international standard levels of IPC programs. So again, looking at Nigeria as a specific example, we have here our joint external evaluation that was done in 2019. A mid-assessment review was done. And you can see on the screen here, I've circled an item focused on infection prevention and control. Our score in this item as a country is 1, which is red because it means that we are not practicing IPC the way we should. Now, part of this is because the indicators for this particular item changed over time, but it just shows us that we have a long way to go. And Nigeria, again, is not unique in this fact. Many countries have difficulty implementing successfully robust and comprehensive IPC programs. So this is a slide taken from a website that I would encourage all of us to look at. The topic of this conference, of course, is biosecurity. And this website is all about preparedness. It rates the preparedness levels of countries. So as of just a few days ago, 18th of November, Nigeria went through an update to our readiness score. How ready are we for the next epidemic? And you can see on the screen here, we were at 39, which was red, meaning we were not ready at all. We now have a score that, now that it has been reworked as of this month, of 46, which means we have made progress, but we still have work to do. And I think that's really the theme of this conference, is to identify those things that we still need to do to increase our level of preparedness across the country. So now I want to talk about IPC as part of the COVID-19 response. I'm going to talk a bit about what our organization has been doing, as well as what we've been doing in partnership with Lagos State, because we are a member of the IPC pillar, Infection Prevention and Control pillar of the Lagos State Emergency Operations Center, EOC. So I'll start by talking about what we did before COVID hit. So before we had our first patient at the end of February, we knew that COVID would come. And so we started by doing IPC assessments and training programs for the two infectious disease centers that we identified in Lagos State, Luth Infectious Disease Unit and Mainland Hospital Yaba. Now we did these programs at the end of January and the beginning of February before the first case hit, just to get ready and in anticipation of what we knew would eventually come. Okay, so in terms of what we've done with the Lagos State IPC pillar, the Emergency Operations Center, there are 5 main mandates of the IPC pillar, the work we've done and continue to do. Of course, there's training, there's site assessment, there's monitoring and evaluation of isolation and treatment centers, there's tracking of health worker infections, and there's the development of specific guidelines and SOPs on how to manage COVID-19 and limit the transmission. So I'll talk a little bit more in detail about each of these now. When it comes to training, we've done training nonstop. We've trained over 4,200 personnel, and that is the majority of that is clinical personnel. However, we've also trained non-clinical personnel, both facility support staff, so think of ambulance drivers, cleaners, admin support staff in health facilities, those that are in charge of cleaning. We've also done trainings for PPMDs and community pharmacists, so the sort of the unregulated health sector. We know in a lot of communities we have pharmacists who are maybe unlicensed and unregulated. However, they are the first point of call. When somebody in that community is sick, they don't necessarily go to a hospital. They go to these patent medicine vendors and they buy drugs. And so we did a training for them as well. And we've also engaged with the Ministry of Education and schools and teachers. We've also conducted IPC assessments. And again, this goes back to how robust IPC is. It's not just about training, though a lot of times we think IPC equals training. It's beyond that. And so what we've done is assess 53 COVID-19 centers. This includes the isolation and treatment facilities, but it also includes a large range of places that were used to hold suspected cases and to quarantine people who are coming into the country. And you can see that these visits were conducted not at the end, not when these facilities were ready to begin operations, but we went in there before they started so we could advise them on the best ways to operate and the safest ways to handle the people that were going to be coming in, the staff that would be working there, to protect them and protect the community from further spread. We also conducted IPC monitoring of 8 of the treatment centers, both public and private, to look at their IPC protocols, to observe what they were doing, to ensure they were complying with what needs to be done to keep people safe. Because again, at the end of the day, IPC is about applying principles at a point of care. Anywhere where someone is receiving health care, they should be able to get, they should be safe. The health workers should be safe, their colleagues should be safe, the patients should be safe, and the community should be safe. So how do we ensure that we're breaking the chain of transmission and stopping the spread of any pathogen at those points of care? It requires monitoring. It's not enough to train someone and just release them into the facility. They must have a monitoring process as well. We need to ensure that we're looking after our staff and taking care of their welfare, because we know that when people are tired, when people are mentally exhausted, it's more likely that they will make a mistake and possibly get infected in the process. Now, I want to talk about health worker infections. The data right now is incomplete, meaning that we don't have all the information about the health workers who have been infected in this pandemic. We're still gathering that information. But what we know is that we worked with the surveillance team to get some of this information. We have 192 health workers that we've identified were infected. 153 of them were clinical workers, but 39 were non-clinical. And that just shows that you don't have to be in front of a COVID-19 patient if you're working in a health facility to get an infection. We had the cooks, we had the security, we had the ambulance drivers, we had a range of other support staff who were infected at work, though they never really interacted directly with a patient. And that just reminds us about how these things spread. All it takes is for one person to get it, to pass it to someone else, and then we have widespread transmission. Now, we did deeper interviews with 89 health workers, and what we found with those 89 health workers was that they had an average of 11 years of experience. And as you can see from this, we had primarily people from secondary and tertiary hospitals. Now, of those 89, 59 of them came in direct contact with COVID-19 patients. But the question was, at the time they were in contact with that patient, did they know the patient had COVID-19 or not? And we found that the majority of them, as you can see on the screen, 78% of them did not know they were interacting with a COVID-19 patient at the time they did. Now, that is a red flag for IPC, because what that tells us is that, remember, I said IPC is something we should be doing routinely, right? It's something that is not an epidemic or pandemic response, it's something we should be doing all the time. But the fact that 78% of them did not know they were interacting with a COVID-19 patient and later identified that patient as the source of their own infection, that means there was a breach or a failure in IPC. That means that the infection prevention and control protocols that were in place to protect that health worker were not being practiced properly or consistently. And that tells us that, again, there are challenges in the implementation of IPC at the facility level. But this also shows us that there were 22% of the health workers that did know they were dealing with a COVID-19 patient. So though they knew they were dealing with a COVID-19 patient, they were still unsuccessful in managing that risk because they later got infected and identified that patient as the source of their infection. So this again just highlights the issue we have with IPC programs across Lagos State. We also asked if they had an IPC program in their facility. And we can see here that 55% of them said they did. But again, 55% are saying they have an IPC program, but we're still having health workers and others getting infected in these facilities. So that tells us that there is a challenge, that there is work that still needs to be done. In addition, we can see that 26% of them did not know if they have an IPC or quality assurance program in their facility. And that is also a problem because if IPC is being done properly, it should be practiced consistently, every day, routinely by everyone in the facility. So there would be no room for somebody to say they don't know if there is a program. If the program is operating properly, it would be clear that there is a program because people would be complying with it. And then we have 19% who said they definitely do not have a program in their facilities. And these are some of the things we need to change. We also found out how the experience was for the health workers that were infected. And we saw that the majority of them were symptomatic. They were either symptomatic at the onset or they were asymptomatic and later developed symptoms. So this also tells us about the severity of their own illness. And we do know that we lost quite a few health workers during this pandemic from now, and we're still tracking that data to get the exact numbers. Another part of our work with IPC in terms of COVID-19 response was to develop guidelines and SOPs. So remember that this is a new virus. People have not seen it before. So the routine things that we do now needs to be guided by the principles of breaking the chain of transmission of infection. And so we had to develop SOPs and guidelines on issues like how do you transport a patient? How do you collect a sample? How do you do these routine things in a way that protects the health worker, the patient, and the surroundings? So we developed IPCs, SOPs, and guidelines. So I want to talk now about the lessons learned. We've done a lot of work. We continue to do the work, but we need to think about lessons learned. And I was very happy to hear yesterday His Excellency Mr. Governor speaking about the fact that Lagos State has actually put in a line item in the budget to reflect on the COVID-19 response and learn lessons and ensure that we document things properly so that we can know how to improve and change things going forward. I think this is also part of the theme of what we've been hearing during this conference is the need to be proactive. We have a choice. We can continue to be reactive, or we can build and sustain the response activities and be stronger on the other side. And I think that really speaks to being proactive about our health sector and about the things we need to do. The first lesson that I would like to share with us this morning is about the fact that IPC is not a public health response. So I said it before. It's not something we should be doing when there is already a biosecurity problem. It's not something we should be doing when the pathogen is already spreading. It's something we must have that is a routine part of our health system, of the way that we operate, and of the way that we deliver care. It has to be institutionalized in our health sector. It has to be integrated into all health specialties. And I want us to just point out the fact that COVID-19 was a new pathogen, right? It was something we had not seen in human beings before. And so we did not have a treatment. We did not have a cure. We did not have a vaccine. We still don't. And so IPC really is the backbone of how we stop this pandemic. Because if we don't have the principles of IPC operating properly, we cannot stop this pandemic. And we cannot limit its transmission. We definitely cannot stop it completely, but we can at least limit how it spreads. But we need to do this in a systematic way. We mustn't continue doing this in emergency mode. It has to become part of our routine operations. And I like to compare it to something that was said yesterday as well, that we're in a war. This is like a war. And so even in times of peace, when there's no enemy per se, no pathogen, we need to be doing these things, because that way we are ready for whatever comes, because we won't know when it's going to come. We're not going to be able to see it, and so we have to ensure that we're ready. The other thing we need to learn from the response so far is that training alone will fail. We've trained, you can see, thousands of people, and we still have transmission of the pathogen. Because at the end of the day, if you train someone and you send them back to a facility or an environment where they don't have the political will or the leadership required to practice what they're being taught, they will fail. If you train someone and you send them to a facility or an environment where they don't have the resources required to practice what they have been taught, they will fail. If you train someone and you send them back to an environment where there's no monitoring, no oversight, no accountability, they will not implement what they have been taught. They will fail. And I want us to understand that when we're talking about IPC, infection prevention and control, it really goes down to the core of how pathogens spread. Pathogens themselves do not spread. It is human beings and human behavior that spreads them. And so when we're talking about breaking the chain of transmission, when we're talking about reducing the spread of pathogens, we're talking about changing human behavior. It's a behavior change thing, and that's really the essence of public health. And so when you're training someone, you're trying to change their behavior, but it's not enough to train them alone. They must be supported with the leadership that's required to implement what they're being trained on, the resources required to do what they're being trained to do, and the monitoring required to ensure that they, of course, will make mistakes, but they can assess their mistakes, learn from their mistakes, and be better. And so we need to ensure that these kind of IPC programs that are not just training programs are embedded at every level, national, state, and at the facility level. So where do we go from here? That's the biggest question. And I think that one thing that has been very encouraging for us is to see that there is a lot of attention on IPC. We've been doing this for several years now, and this year IPC is like the hot topic in town. It's the thing that everyone wants to know. It's the thing everyone wants to be trained on. It's the thing that everyone is focusing on in terms of capacity building to respond to the pandemic. And it's because of what I mentioned earlier. We don't have anything else to fall back on. We don't have a drug, we don't have a vaccine, and so IPC is the only thing we can do to tackle this pandemic. So people now more than ever this year, 2020, know what IPC is, and there's demand for it. So we have to sustain this momentum. We have to ensure that we continue putting funding and resources towards this issue, because we can't go back to sleep. We must not go back to the way things were, whatever that means. We have to continue funding and focusing on this, because this is ultimately what will keep our health workers safe, which will then in turn keep our community safe. Another thing is we need to establish these programs. So while we're keeping the attention and funding and energy towards IPC, we need to translate that into sustainable long-term impact. And that means that we're establishing horizontal IPC programs. And I'm using the word horizontal because I'm saying these are programs that are going to cut across every aspect of healthcare delivery in Nigeria and in Lagos states. And this should be at every level, national, state, and facility. We need the policies that will guide what IPC should and shouldn't be. We need the guidelines that will tell us how do we do it. And we need the personnel that are trained and dedicated and are responsible for ensuring it is done. Because we know that if we give this task to nobody, we will not see any impact. It has to be the responsibility of key identified people at the national, state, and facility levels. And this may seem like a big task, but the truth is that we have what it takes to get this done. We have seen it succeed in pockets of Nigeria across the country. We have fantastic success stories and case studies that we can learn from. We have facilities like FMC at Butemeta, not far from here, which is practicing IPC in a way that others are not. We have expertise from WHO that we can adapt to our country and to our states. We have expertise from NCDC, policies and guidelines that are developed and are still being developed on IPC and how we can do this. So we have the resources we need. A member of the Biosecurity Governing Council for Lagos States, Professor Folashade Nkunshola, is the head of the Infection Control Africa Network, and she's an IPC expert. We have the expertise and the resources to do this. It's just a matter of taking that step and making that action to get it done. I was very happy when Honorable Commissioner said on day one of this conference that it's not correct for us to send our frontline health workers into the battlefield without preparing them. And that's really what this is about. And Dr. Coker yesterday also mentioned the need for the personnel when she was talking about the need for this network of people who are ready to respond to any threat that arrives at any time, because we don't know when the next thing is going to happen. Another thing about the way forward is that we need to think about other stakeholders. Though IPC is traditionally practiced in a hospital or health facility environment, we need to think about the other places where we need to embed these IPC programs. And one example of that are the points of entry into this country. COVID-19 entered Nigeria. It was not already here. It came in through our points of entry: airports, seaport, land borders. That's how pathogens spread. Whether it's COVID-19 or any other thing, our points of entry are the vulnerable parts that we need to pay attention to. And so this is a meeting that we had in the beginning of February at the airport here in Lagos State International Airport. And this is the Public Health Emergency Management Team. And the idea of this team is to start preparing for any particular emergency that may happen. When we heard there was a pandemic or an event, public health event of international concern spreading around the world, we realized there was a need to activate this team at the point of entry that we felt was most vulnerable, which was the international airport here in Lagos State. And we as an organization have been part of testing the capacity of the airport through simulation activities to simulate what would happen if a pathogen entered the airport. How would the people respond? How would it be contained? And so on. And so we need to think about IPC in this aspect as well, because the people at the airport also are, in a sense, on the front line. Though we talk about frontline health workers as meaning the people who work in the isolation centers, the truth is that it's not just them. Frontline health workers are now people that work in places where COVID-19 is a direct threat, including these points of entry. We've also developed the first marine public health emergency contingency plan in Nigeria. So as part of the international health regulations, it's stipulated that countries, every designated point of entry into a country has an emergency public health contingency plan, a plan for a public health event like an epidemic, outbreak, or pandemic. And so we built the first one for the seaport in Nigeria, which was Apapa Seaport here in Lagos. And unfortunately, we didn't get to finish the process before COVID struck. So COVID interrupted the process of us having this plan on ground for the seaport. But I'm sharing this to say that these stakeholders at the seaport are not health workers. They're members of immigration, customs, ports authority, port health, of course, and stakeholders like shipping companies and shipping agents. And yet they have a role to play in biosecurity because they are at a point of entry where a potential pathogen could come in. And so our work with them now that we have the plan on ground for the seaport is now to test it, just like we did at the airport, run simulations, embed an IPC program in their work, and ensure that they are prepared for whatever may come next. Another stakeholder group that we've engaged in this process are airlines. So the airlines came very early on worried that how are they going to manage it? And the aviation industry really is the driver of pathogen spread around the world. This pandemic was driven by the aviation industry. There's no doubt about that. And so they are really, again, frontline health workers, whether they are trained as medical personnel or not. And so they needed to understand how to be protected. So we did, again, the same thing, setting up IPC programs for them, testing it and doing simulations to ensure that they understood what to do in both the best and worst case scenarios. Another stakeholder group that we need to consider are schools. So we know that we've had outbreaks of COVID-19 in 4 boarding schools here in Lagos State, and we continue to monitor the situation in schools. Schools, meaning teachers, people who work in the staff clinic, if they have a school clinic, the nurses. These are also a version of people who are on the front lines of this pandemic, who also need IPC. And so we've been working with the Ministry of Education to ensure that the policies and guidelines required take into consideration what they need to do to protect themselves in schools, what they need to do to protect the staff, students, and then the community, because we know that students, of course, go to school, go home, and the school is not a closed environment. So it really is a place where there can be exponential increase and of transmission of COVID-19. So in conclusion, I think this really just summarizes what we've been speaking about throughout this conference, which is that yes, we are in a crisis, we are in a pandemic, but at the same time, there's a huge, huge opportunity for us here to understand what we need to do to build back and be more resilient as a result of this experience. So we need to look at those opportunities, and what I want to advocate for today is that IPC becomes part of the conversation. It's essential. There's no other way to stop this COVID-19 pandemic because, again, we don't have the drugs or the vaccines that we need at this point. So the only way we can really, truly put a stop to it is to ensure that we're doing IPC at every level. We have a very unique opportunity right now to get this thing right. Again, we have the attention and the resources we need on this issue. And so to protect our health security and to save lives and stop the spread of all pathogens, we need to ensure that we are setting up IPC programs and that we're attaching them to accountability systems. Because again, we know that things cannot work if there's no accountability. We need to have ways of measuring compliance and giving rewards and consequences accordingly. We know that other pathogens will come, though we're not done with COVID-19. We expect there will be others. And so this is really the time to build the resilience that we need. And it has to happen through this investment that we're talking about right now so that we can safeguard our future. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause for Ms. Williams? I think that was not only a fantastic presentation, but also a fantastic delivery as well. We do appreciate the sacrifice of Ameyo, and we are looking for that her foundation will grow from strength to strength. Some of us had the privilege to know her way back in the day in school, and she's always been like that, a noble woman from a noble family, and the sacrifice she made was not, it wasn't surprising. It was just her. That's the kind of human being she was. God bless you, and keep the good work going. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Margaret Ajehere. I hope I got that right. Ajehere. Is she here? Pardon? Oh. Margaret. Thank you. Could you give her a round of applause, please? Thank you very much. Apologies for...
Thank you for the kind introduction. Okay, so it's pronounced Ojahiri. Good morning, everyone, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Please permit me to stand on existing protocols. I want to thank the leadership and the organizers of the GET conference, because from reliable information, I gather that I'm going to be the first psychiatrist, that should scare you a bit, the first psychiatrist, first mental health practitioner that will be delivering a presentation in a biosecurity conference. So that has some twist somewhat. But I want to thank them for the leadership role they have taken in addressing a pertinent topic, yet one that has been sidelined to the rear. They have broken the ice by pioneering a holistic approach to addressing biosecurity challenges. And I'll be talking on beyond the visible burden of biosecurity threats across Africa. Can there be resilience without incorporating mental health strategies? It's a mouthful, though, but oh, sorry, I have messed this up. Can you please help me change the slide? I'll go with you. It's a mouthful, but at the end of the presentation, can I come down, please? I think I'll access it better. At the end of the presentation, it's expected that we should be able to describe the relationship between mental health and biosecurity, describe the burden and factors contributed to the omission of mental health in previous integrative approaches, and define the role of mental health and the strategies necessary in building resilience in the face of biosecurity threats. Um, so, biosecurity threats to different individuals have different interpretations. For the nursing mother, it's the fear of contaminants in her formula feed. For the farmer, is the pests and diseases that are ravaging his crops and his livestock. For some, it's the fear of a weapon of mass destruction. And in our reality, we are faced with one. However, one thing that has been certain, that has been established, is that in the face of biosecurity threats, the environment, the economic sector, the health sector are usually the areas that are adversely affected. These are just some images to describing the visible physical burdens of biosecurity threats. These are usually the things we see in the face of public health emergencies. We are concerned with the increased risk of morbidity. Oh, have you arrested hemorrhages? Are you dealing with the fractures? We saw how all attention was pushed to the physical health sector. And there was disruption in the health service delivery. There was some confusion at the beginning of the pandemic across the world. Yes, in the socioeconomic sector too, it has impacted adversely. And we've had several presentations in that regards and the way forward. There's been losses, property, jobs, and the support system, not just from the direct consequences of the COVID-19, but we have seen the ripple effect of the lockdown and the billion boys and the vandalization. So the ripple effect has also impacted on our socio-economic sector, deprivations of basic amenities, and food shortage. So usually, in the face of biosecurity threats, we see that we focus on the physical aspect of health. This picture captures some parts of Eastern Africa and the Horn of Africa. We can see desert locusts ravaging crops. What hits you when you see this picture is, oh, this farmer is going to lose a lot of crops, is going to lose money and all that, and maybe the government has to intervene. But for us in psychiatry, in the mental health sector, what we see is a man who is faced with several life challenges because for all we know, he had borrowed money to invest into the farm, and now his crops has been destroyed. There's a possibility that the debtors will come calling, and then he's going to be having sleepless nights. And then he begins to feel sad, he feels, what's life? But he wants to share it with people, and they say, please, man up. It's one of those things. It's happened to everybody. But we forget that this person has faced different life experiences. This person has his own personalities and challenges. And because he cannot see an outlet to address these issues, he starts to contemplate suicide. But we don't see that part. What we see is usually the physical aspect. We view it through the telescope of the physical component of health. For too long, mental health has been the third wheel. For too long, we have looked at public health emergencies through physical and some extent social. And at this point, I'm reminded of the tricycle. Yes, the tricycle might not be as fast as some two-wheel, some four-wheeled vehicles. But one sure thing is that it will definitely get you to your destination. For peradventure, one of the wheels gets punctured, one of the wheels gets twisted. Unlike when we have a flat and we have to use that funny-shaped wheel, we can only go so fast and so far. Because the truth is we are strong as our weakest link. But somehow, we have been relegating mental health to the rear. And I think it's important at this point for us to remind ourselves of the definition of health. I have highlighted the components: the physical, the mental, and the social. It's a tripod. And I like when the MC used the illustration of the tripod pods. It can only function when the three legs are there. Some have even said we should look at it from an aspect of a four-component or a four-dimension definition, including the spiritual, because research has repeatedly shown that patients or people who believe in an entity greater than themselves actually do well in the face of adversity. But we're not asking for too much. Just give us the physical, the mental, and the social. So I want to ask, or I want us to just ponder, why is there the neglect? Why is it that mental health is not usually carried along? Well, we are thankful. During the COVID-19 response, at some point, we were remembered after 3 months of the establishment of the PTF, the task force. So we are grateful. Yes, we were not remembered initially. Psychosocial response was not included, but we are getting there. So we are wondering why the neglect. Is it that there is no link between biosecurity threats and mental health? Or is it that the burden of mental health is minuscule and it's not relevant? I'm not going to bore us with this slide because we've had so much presentation on biosecurity threats across the world, biosecurity threats in Africa. I'm not going to bore us, but I just want to remind us on the fact that, yes, we do have biosecurity threats. They are here with us. And we have seen theories, research that support the link between mental health and infectious disease. It's no longer news that at the initial phase of COVID-19, when the pandemic was in the initial phase, it was thought to be majorly a respiratory disease, but we have seen that it's multisystemic, and it actually has some link with the brain, some neurotropic properties. We are seeing some ways that it can get into the brain, crossing the blood-brain barrier, causing the immune system to go into an overdrive, and we're getting the infection and inflammatory response, and also blood clotting abnormalities. So are there common mental health conditions that are linked with biosecurity threats? Yes. There are a myriad of them, but the common ones that we have seen repeatedly, not just with COVID-19, but with the series of infectious diseases that we have been faced with, Ebola, Lassa fever, we see anxiety. If we cast the mind to when there was a fear of Ebola outbreak in Nigeria, there was panic. We had hysteria. People were drinking salt, we were doing all sorts because they didn't want to come down with the disease. So we don't need research to know. However, research is very important. So there's anxiety, there's PTSD, there's depression, and we are seeing a lot of people using substance use, alcohol as a maladaptive coping mechanism to escape from their fears. With increasing population being exposed to biosecurity threats, is not surprising. And then you want to ask, are there particular occupations that are faced with biosecurity threats? Yes. Studies have shown the farmers, because when the environment is affected, the farmer is one occupation that the farmers rather are one group of people that are affected adversely. And studies have also shown that their suicide is quite high in them. Frontline workers too are at higher risk of developing mental health problems. We have some research which have come up. I and a few of my colleagues have done some research, and we saw that 22% of depression was found. 22% of couples during the lockdown had some form of depression following the COVID-19, and several others are coming. But what we see is that preparedness is poor, particularly when you're talking about incorporating the mental health sector. So at this point, we want to look at the burden of mental health conditions. Maybe it's not something that is major, that's why it's being neglected. But as of 2015, the mental, neurological, and substance use, let's just use mental health conditions, contributed 14% of the global burden of health, of diseases rather. That was 5 years ago, before the turmoil, before the pandemic. A significant proportion of the global burden of disease was contributed, mental illness contributed that aspect. And interestingly, 75% of people with these conditions are in sub-Saharan Africa, in low and middle-income countries like Nigeria. As at 2016, 4 years ago, 1 billion people suffered from mental health problems across the world. Now the population of the world is 7.8. So we are saying that at least 1/7 of the world's population have a form of mental health challenge. However, I know that's been economical, because with the increasing turmoil, we are seeing an escalation in mental health conditions. And it goes on and on, and it goes on and on. So coming down to Africa, are we exempted? No, on the contrary, it's even worse in Africa. Because in Africa, we have a wide treatment gap. That's the number of people who are exposed, well, number of people who have a mental health challenge, as against the number of people who access treatment. In Nigeria, it's just 20% of people who have a mental health condition that actually have access to health care. It's worse in countries like Sierra Leone, that it's over 90%. Actually, as at 2018 was 98.8, and 85 in Ghana. Our health workers, we have a problem of health workers, mental health workers across Africa. It's 1.4 to 100,000 as against the 9 to 100,000. However, in certain European countries, it's up to 50 to 100,000. In Nigeria, we'll come to Nigeria anyhow. Are we being funded? No, we're not. Less than 1% of the health budget goes to mental health. And when you look at the expenditure per capita, it's actually non-existent. So we are just getting the crumbs of what comes from health to push it forward. But wait for it, because the pandemic is looming. It's no longer news. The mental health it's going to be the pandemic in the aftermath or even running concurrently. In Nigeria, okay, this is just a study supporting the fact that if we stop being reactionary, like it seemed or was in our place to be, we'll realize that engaging in preventive measures will actually save us a whole lot of stress, return on investment, and benefit the health and economic sector in Africa. This is a map just describing what I mentioned about number of psychiatrists per 100,000. And the part of the world that is in brown, in brown, is colored brown, that's majorly what you see in Africa. 0 to 1 psychiatrist to 100,000. Actually, Nigeria has gone up to about 2 to 200,000 people, which is pretty worrisome. As at 2019, the federal government released a report and said 20 to 30% of Nigerians have one form of mental health challenge. Break that down, that's 40 to 60 million people. During the course of the COVID pandemic, about 2 months or so ago, the president of the Association of Psychiatrists in Nigeria reported that it had gone up to 40%. That's 80 million people. And it's still climbing because we're having more people coming out with mental health challenge. But okay, so I have to rush up. I don't know how I just overshoot. I didn't know I was up to. So yeah. So sorry, I've lost my stream of thought. Yeah, we're having less psychiatrists addressing mental health challenges, and we have an ongoing brain drain going on. So, and it's not that the neglect is pervasive. It's across board. It's across board. Despite all this, we're seeing in the Global Health Security Agenda, it was excluded in the 8 action package. Global Preparedness Monitoring Board of the WHO in its first annual report, they also excluded mental health. The Global Health Security, the same thing. Even in the Millennium Development Goals, we saw that it was excluded. But with a lot of hue and cry, it was included into the Sustainable Development Goals. And the truth is, you cannot push mental health without, you can't push all these goals without incorporating mental health. Can I ask for 5 minutes, please? The CEO, please. I haven't gotten there. Sort of like rattled me. Thank you. He's giving me the permission. So this is the 3 monkeys. See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. That's been the story of mental health. We know it's there, but we don't want to see it. We know it's there, we don't want to talk about it. We know it's there, we don't want to hear about it. And stigma is no longer used as stigma is a contributing factor. Oh, I don't want to be told. I don't want you. It's easy for you to. Somebody has diabetes, you send a girl to health soon card. Somebody has hypertension, you're like, oh, please give him time off work. But somebody comes down with mental health condition, and you highlight his name for retrenchment when you have to downsize. Is it alien to our culture? No, it's not alien to our culture. When we look at suicide being one of the leading, well, mental health being the leading cause of suicide in our society, you know that when we remember Shango, the god of thunder, he committed suicide. I'm not saying he had a mental health challenge. When you look at Things Fall Apart, Okonkwo died from suicide. So it's not alien to our culture, but there's been a poor awareness. And that's why someone like me, I'm here now in a biosecurity conference talking about mental health problems. Our policies favorable? No, we don't have a mental health law in Nigeria. We still operate on the Lunacy Act of 1958, inherited from our colonial masters. So how does this relate to resilience? If you are not, no, take it back to the slide. How much resilience can somebody who lacks mental capacity carry out? Somebody who lacks mental capacity, handling a biobank, handling a very sensitive position in the biobank, can access sensitive information. And then you're seeing bioterrorism happen, you're seeing biocrimes happen, because he can use the violence, the pathogens, the violence of that pathogen to do havoc. If you remember the anthrax attack in 2001 rather, we saw that you can do anything, but it's important that we ensure that people who are mentally stable are the ones that handle such positions. A farmer who has been devastated and who is depressed, how much resilience does that person want to, how much resilience are you going to see in that person? He can't be bothered. Whether his crops is gone or not, he can't be bothered. Somebody who is already paranoid and be listening to this conspiracy theory, and you tell him to come and take vaccination, you're wasting your time. So it's important that we link mental health and resilience. Yes, we've seen this definition. It's no longer in use. But is it functional? We need definitions that capture it along the system, along individuals, along structures, from the individuals up to the highest level of government. And when we're looking at resilience, we don't just look at it in isolation. You look at it along the continuum of life. You can't be talking about resilience, the same method of approach for an individual here on the VI with that who is in Bama in Maiduguri. It doesn't work. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You have to be flexible. Or when the COVID-19 lockdown happened and people were worried about schooling and all that, people in the IDP camp in Jos, where I stay, have been out of school for like 6 years. So you have to ensure that the strategies that you're employing is flexible and it's personalized. So I want to remind us of the definition of mental health. I'll soon be rounding up, please. Definition of mental health. Because the same factors that support resilience are the same factors that promote mental health. So this is what mental health means. But if a proportion of the population lack the ability to realize their potentials, lack the ability to cope with stress, lack the ability to contribute to their community, how resilient can that society be? There's a bi-directional relationship. So what's the way forward? There has to be a paradigm shift. It's about time we begin to engage multiple stakeholders, inclusive, coordinated, and integrated approach. And that's why I will thank the leadership for pioneering this. I wouldn't, because of our time, I'll skip this and go to, local strategies. We need to begin to, no, take it back. There's one more. Take it back, yeah. Advocacy. That's why I'm here, letting us know that we can't be talking about security. We can't be talking about strengthening Africa's resilience in tackling emerging threats, our security threats, if we are not capturing health in totality. So we need to engage in an advocacy program. We are already doing that on the mental health front, but it has to be an inclusive thing now, multi-sectorial, ensuring global mental health security, going into the communities, not just staying here in our comfort zone in Lagos and talking about it, but going to the nitty-gritty in the communities and talking about taking a multidisciplinary team with us. And then utilizing local and cultural sensitive interventions. Yes, the GET should look into having tools, not just a standalone thing, but developing tools. I like the fact that the previous speaker put out the joint evaluation, external evaluation sheet, because mental health has been excluded. So GED can take the lead and have one that incorporates mental health. Research is very vital. If we look at it, we'll see Africa is not on the radar here. Africa is not on the radar, but we have what it takes to write our own script. We should stop waiting for people to write our script and then we will play the role. We should begin to do research. Turn it out. And because we can't ask for money, we can't ask for funds. Yes, cash has been said a lot of times. But how do you defend the cash when you cannot show the magnitude of the burden? But we need research to do this. Yeah? International strategies, more incorporation, more collaborative approaches. Yeah? Yes, it's no longer news that COVID-19 ensured physical and emotional isolation, insecurity, and stigma on individuals globally. The magnitude across sectors, we're still recovering from it. And it's no longer news, too, that in the aftermath or concurrently, we are going to be seeing a looming mental health pandemic. But what is important is that we should learn from the lessons. We had several opportunities to have learned, but we have been waiting for people to write a script. It has to change. Going forward, conferences like this should change the narrative. Integrative, holistic approaches, facilitating, then, like I've said, research, and the use of technology. We've seen it being played out here. We've had physical presenters, we've had virtual presenters, the use of technology. At some point, earlier this year, talking about rendering services, mental health services via Zoom would have been considered somewhat unethical to some people, but we're using it now. So we should encourage the use of that. So in conclusion, thank you for giving me time to conclude. Yeah, in conclusion, I will say, use the words of Vikram Patel, one of our renowned psychiatrists, there is no health without mental health. For too long, mental health has been sidelined despite the enormous burden of diseases. An exclusion from mental health from biosecurity initiatives is to encourage our fragile health sector and persist in the lack of preparedness for present and future health crises. I'll draw the curtains with this Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next time is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What Dr. Margaret has pointed out to is something we tend to gloss over, or I wouldn't say gloss over, but we tend to sort of neglect. And that is mental health, mental capacity. And she's also drawn this not only to mental issues from a broad patient, from a broad perspective of people, but what about medical personnel, handlers in crises like this? For example, many of us know the kind of pressure a number of health workers faced during the pandemic. There's a lot of pressure in terms of the number of patients that you had to see, the fear and the stress, because don't let's deceive ourselves, even doctors and nurses and health workers had their own apprehension when they get in contact with COVID patients. We also had the fear of uncertainty, other sorts of economic fear. And I wouldn't be surprised if if we dig deep into our psychosocial interrogation and activities, and if we did a bit more analysis and research, maybe the response after COVID in terms of this EndSARS and the tensions and how people and how the crowds responded, maybe they're not unconnected with the mental condition of a large portion of our population. Anyway, I want to thank Dr. Margaret for giving us that, and I want us to give her a very resounding round of applause. In his usual manner. Professor Adegoke is here, please. Can you hear me, sir? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be in your midst this morning here. I'm joining you from Kansas City. It's actually 3:57 a.m. in Kansas City, but I'm happy to be in your midst. I hope I'm being heard. Is my volume okay? Excellent. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully we can get started with this. I believe you can see my screen, can you? All right. So I sort of modified my topic a little bit. So the topic is that I'm going to address today is global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, building resilient climate. So I'm speaking about climate, so climate change and climate impacts, and the links um, to the pandemic and and to biology and to nature, because I am a climate scientist. So I know the room is mostly filled of medical folks, but the links and the nexus between climate and environment and health are very tight and very strong. So we're going to sort of explore some of those today in this talk. Okay. So my in the presentation outline, I'm going to try to walk through this. So I'm going to speak to this disease and environment connection. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I don't want to assume that everybody in the audience on top of the global drivers of climate change and what the global outlook is. So I will give some updates on that. And then I'll focus attention on Africa itself. This conference is taking place in Africa. Most of the audience are Africans in one of our global mega cities, but is right there in Africa, Lagos. So we're going to speak to some of the climate risks, how the impacts of those risks, and also focus a little bit on the financing aspect of this. How do you finance climate exists, and it holds globally, but in tropical environments, it's that connection is tighter for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons really is we're beginning to see globally, but also in Africa, that intersection between the natural habitats, of wildlife and our own human activities, either because we're venturing into their spaces through biodiversity loss, through degradation, through things. I mean, we depend on those forest resources, those natural resources, in a lot of ways to live, that could result in transmission of infectious diseases. Then climate change it's a fact that is occurring. We know that. But when we say, and I'm going to speak to climate change in shortly with and illustrate a couple of major aspects of it. But as temperatures increase, right? It's generating stress on water resources, generating impacts on even the hydrologic cycle. Okay, so in many ways, what this linkages between extremes, and the extremes could be either in the form of less water because we're having more intense droughts, or because we're having floods. In some cases, it's the hydrologic cycle is actually intensified, and you're having this storms that you would normally not occur in Nigeria. Just Nigeria, for instance, we have had what you would call a 100-year flood. Okay, that's a flood that you would expect only once in about 100 years. We have had several of those in the last, say, 15 years. We have had at least 2, 3 100-year flood events in the last 15 years in Nigeria. So these are also drivers of zoonotic disease outbreaks, along, of course, with land use change. We live in Lagos. There, we know how valuable and how precious land is, and every way in which people can lay their hands on land, they're going after it. And that is causing, again, as we're expanding our boundaries, of our cities, we're expanding into areas that put us in conflict, put us in with infectious disease causing agents. So there have been a number of those recently, right? Since 2012, 2012 was the MERS global issue. It was a pandemic. There was almost 1,000 people, 858 deaths there, and then more recently. We had Ebola, right, which killed over 11,000 people. But this year has been a year for the ages, and that will be remembered. I think as long as humans live, they would refer to this year because of this COVID-19 pandemic that we're still in the middle of. We still don't have a handle over it. I looked at the data from the WHO just yesterday. We've had over 60.89 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, and 1.43 people have died this year alone as a result of this COVID-19 that we're facing. So we're talking of really, really major impacts here. But let's advance to looking, shifting gears a little bit now, and let's look at and so this pandemics are global in effect, but climate change is also, right, a global phenomenon, driven by a range of factors, but the effect is global. The impact is local as well, across multiple levels. So on my left there, this is a curve that I think most people would have seen from 1900 to projected to 2100. I'm not sure how much of this you can see, but you can see a divergence of two lines there. The red is going up, the blue is sort of flattening down. Okay, the red is business as usual. If we continue to do what we're doing, temperature will keep rising. Okay, And the blue is if we take a low emission pathway. We do things right now. We're committed already, no matter what we do. Or even if you stop driving all cars and stop doing everything, that's producing greenhouse gases, we're still going to keep warming at least for the next 50, 60, 70 years. So because the gas is already in the atmosphere, but eventually the curve is going to flatten out if we follow that low emission path. On the top right, what is superimposed there is temperature that is rising. Just from 1800 to 2016, you can see the rise in temperature. This is the temperature anomaly now. That means the difference, over a period of time. That anomaly is rising. So that's indicating that the underlying variable itself, which is temperature, is increasing significantly. And then if you superimpose that with carbon dioxide, you can see the match is remarkably strong. So CO2, I'm not going to tell you that carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases are the only drivers of climate change. In fact, I belong to a school of scientists who we prioritize as well land use changes. We think and we believe, and data and analysis show that changes, other types of changes that is occurring in the environment, including especially land use change, is also a driver of this temperature change that we're seeing, that we call global change. But look at the lower panel there. These are years with the hottest months in history. Every single year you have you make a new record. So every single year we're hitting a new record in terms of the hottest months globally. This is based on global data. So it's if there's anybody out there who is a climate denial, I don't even know why that term still exists. They are not living they're living an alternate reality that is not, that certainly is not backed by any data. This is the data. This is what I'm showing you right now is data. So globally, if you look at the cost of this, the cost of, in terms of weather-related losses worldwide, you can, each bar that you're seeing there is the losses in billions of dollars, okay, that is attributable to weather, either a major flood event, a hurricane, or something. So what we can see there, is again a very significant increase in these losses over time. If you draw a plot, you see those two lines there. You can see that they are trending up. Okay. In losses, you can look at them in two ways, right? You can look at insured losses or non-insured losses. Unfortunately for us in Africa and including Nigeria, there where our audience is seated right now, our insurance industry is not as developed as it should be. There's a lot of opportunity for the insurance to kick up, and to really develop further. So in many of our losses, when you have a flood in Lagos, for instance, and people lose their homes, lose their cars, and a lot of that is uninsured. It's a little bit different here in the West. So the lower numbers, the blue color there, are insured, but both cases have risen significantly over the last. If you look back, especially say over the last 30, 40, 50 years, So that's the global outlook. So this data that you're looking at that is shown here, it's also global data, but this is now, I'm now beginning to shift attention to Africa now. Okay. On the low, on the left panel, there is global emissions. You see those circles there is indicative of how large your emissions are. So we've established, right, that greenhouse gases, especially CO2, is highly correlated with this increase in temperature, right? And we can see that in Africa, where we are, in most of our audience is, and where this conference is taking place, our footprint in terms of CO2 emissions is insignificant compared to the rest of the world, Europe or the US or even Asia. But look at the right map. The right map is the right diagram. There is the risk, or what you call the vulnerability index. So which parts of the world are dealing with a high risk? In terms of and your vulnerability is high. Okay, if you have high exposure to whatever it is that you are dealing with, and then you have low capacity to deal with that exposure. Okay, so if your exposure is high, for instance, in the US, our exposure to climate-induced hazards are high. Almost there's something happening somewhere in the US. It's either forests are burning in California, or hurricanes are coming in Florida, or somewhere, But this is the richest country in the world, right? So after each of those events, the country is able to mobilize billions of dollars into help recovery and to do all of that. So because of that, the risk is low. But look at Africa. Our risk is the highest. It's the highest. The red mark there is extreme risk. Most of Africa, including Lagos, where you guys are, extremely high risk. So if you look at, let's break down these hazards from where, some of them are due to drought, some of them are due to floods, sea level rise in some cases for our coastal locations. Many of our big cities are from Cape Town to Lagos to Cairo. They're low lying, and so vulnerable to storm surges and sea level rise. And then to the right here, impacts on livelihoods. So the impact for us. So when people talk out, about climate change, it's not theoretical anymore. Okay, it's affecting our health in a whole range of ways. Okay, Lagos State there, after every major flood, there will always be followed by a spike in infectious diseases because water becomes contagious or contaminated rather, and just the capacity to live healthy lives gets diminished, both in the urban and in the rural areas. But let me continue. So I think this fact is established in terms of our impacts. We can address that some more, but that's So what are we talking here in terms of sustainable finance? In terms of what there are a couple of things here that this may be a little bit busy, but let me just indicate, okay, that the investments that are required to address climate change is the African Development Bank has estimated that we need by 2030. 2030 is only only 10 years away from now. If we're going to be able to address this issue properly, we need $3 trillion to be able to do that. Okay, and that's just don't forget that number. Okay, but there are other numbers that are important as well. there are opportunities for investment as well. So, I mean, Lagos is a major, financial capital in Africa. There's a component of all of this that really we need to begin to focus attention on, to bring in investment dollars, to capitalize on some of these opportunities there. But I'm going to go on to my key messages now, because I have my eyes on the time, so that I don't go over. So the first message is related to this COVID outbreak and these infectious diseases that I said earlier on. There's that very tight connection between environment and that. So what do you do about that? You prioritize natural capital investment. Okay, that means that we need to put in money into protecting and environmental conservation and regeneration. Okay, there are ways in which we can do that, but we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. That's an important point. The key message number 2 is there's a loss of biodiversity, again, because of human encroachment on natural ecosystems that we talked about earlier on. That is accelerating the transmission of pathogens into our environment. So what do you do about that? We're investing money now post-COVID as globally. It's a really important, governments all over the world are doing that. It's a really crucial time and important opportunity for us to design our policies. And I know some of the people in the room, right in Lagos, there are policy people, including our chief host of this conference, and you have to develop policies. But let's develop policies such that those policies not only have an economic focus, but they can also address these issues of climate change that we are talking about and have social outcomes. We call that the triple bottom line benefits. Okay, so when you spend $1, make sure that dollar is not just giving you $1 in benefits in terms of finance or economics, but there are core benefits that you are deriving out of it as well. Message number 3. I couldn't but refer to this issue of air pollution, right? Some studies have shown very clearly that because of COVID, because of air pollution, especially where you have high PM2, is particulate matter pollution, the impact of COVID, especially on the respiratory aspect, is even more severe. The studies have been done here in the US. We haven't had a lot of data yet from Africa on this, but Lagos is an important city. Okay, air pollution is a major city there, and I cannot overemphasize the need for us to begin to address this in Lagos. To be able to generate, we need to put in place capacity to monitor and address the air pollution issue in Lagos. But there's a very strong connection there that data and new studies are showing in terms of that connection. So what do you do about that? Again, some of these new investments, public stimulus money investments, the industries, whether it's airlines or whether it is discos are the power generating companies or transportation companies, whoever we support, okay, because they have been impacted by what's going on, all right? Let's make sure that as they, that they commit themselves to a cleaner, a lower emissions future. Whatever they do, if we give them public money, let's get some public good out of that public money that we spend. Key message number 4. So climate change is global, right? We just said that. Africa, we have made some progress in Africa. Economic development is going, but some of those gains that we have made in the last 10, 20 years we stand to lose them. They are being eroded by this impact of climate change. So, in fact, African states already, the African Development estimates that we spend about 2% of our GDP just to try to deal with this problem of climate change. So we have an opportunity here, and we want to we address that by saying that we should find ways to drive climate resilient, low carbon development that will, first of all, it will boost our growth. It will help us deal with this energy deficit. Okay, everybody in Nigeria knows that we have a massive energy deficit in Nigeria, but it's not just in Nigeria; it's across Africa. Even South Africa. I have lived in South Africa, worked in South Africa. I mean, they are doing a lot better than probably everybody else. But even there, they still have an energy deficit, and a gap too. So we need to think about how we bridge that deficit, and all of that will reduce poverty if we do it smartly and do it well. And I think my last point here is about, I'm addressing people in a mega city. Lagos is probably one of the top, 10 mega cities in the world, and certainly the Africa's number one. Some people say number two, but I think Africa's number one mega city. They are powerhouses of economic growth, as we know. Even in Nigeria, Lagos drives Nigeria's economy. Okay. Cities produce 85% of global GDP, okay? But they also generate about 70% of the global greenhouse gases. So on the one hand, we can't do without cities because they are drivers of economic growth. On the other hand, they're also a major source of greenhouse gases. So, but because of that as well, there's investment, there's people, the vulnerability is high. So cities are especially vulnerable, and everybody in Lagos knows this. Floods, storm surges, heat waves, all of these climate impacts, they really have a tremendous effect on our cities and city dwellers. So let us, my last point and last message here is, we need to build healthier cities. We need to find ways to make investments, to make our cities more livable, more friendly to health and well-being, and if we do that, okay, it would reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but it will also provide, it will enhance human well-being and human health as well. So I'm going to end. This is my last slide here. Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of the Republic of South Africa, is the chairperson of the African Union as well. It's long comment, This is one of his recent speeches. So this is a direct quote from him. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to speak to the last points that he made. Is that, look, we need money to address this issue, right? But where is that money going to come from? His main point here is that we need to look inwards. We need to find ways to prioritize how we find African money, African expertise, mobilize those two to solve our African problems. And I will end there. So I'm going to yield this back now to the to the conference coordinators, and stop sharing my screen.
Can I get this on? Thank you. Thank you very much, Prop, for that presentation, Professor Jimmy Adegoke there. Thank you so much for your contribution this morning. I'm just going to throw it out there. If we have questions, Professor is still available. We have discussed climate change earlier on today, and that as it affects agriculture, Now, this is another angle to it, or rather, it even covers much more. If we have any questions to ask, please, the microphone will go around to take questions. Anyone? Well, thank you very much for your contribution, Professor. I believe your message was really clear today. Thank you so much for joining us on this conference. Please put your hands together once again for Professor as he takes his leave.
Thank you.
I'd like to call on Dr. Bamidele Mutiu, Director, Lagos State Biobank, for his presentation on the Lagos Biobank project. I believe he's around. Please put your hands together for Dr. Bamidele Mutiu. Please keep clapping. It's a long walk here, and it's a very cold room, I must say. Thank you.
Hello, am I the next speaker? This is Jim Vaught. Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to appreciate the GETS Consortium for organizing this conference. It's always been a pleasure to attending GETS conference right from the inception in 2015 when we started in Senegal. I will be talking about Lagos State Biobank project. The director of Lagos State Biobank. I'm just going to go through this outline because it's just an update on what we normally give at every GETS conference, because the Lagos State Biobank happened to be one of the baby projects of GETS Consortium. And we thank God for the intervention of GETS Consortium in 2015. We are able to bridge the gap post-Ebola virus. So I'm just going to go through the critical vulnerability of Lagos State, the post-EVD research team, training, activity during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'll conclude. We know Lagos State is one of the states in Nigeria, the smallest state, a mega city, because you can hardly delineate one part of the state from another. Everybody is interwoven, so it's a mega city, average population of about 24 million people. So now we know with that, another thing about Lagos State that it has been blessed with the political commitment. We've been blessed with with leaders who have vision. Currently, we have Babajide Sanwo-Olu as our governor, and he came with a 6th agenda, and all of them have to do with issue of security, governance, health, which is very, very crucial. So this is Lagos City. I'm sure for those that came from outside Nigeria, outside the state, you will have enjoyed this scenery when you are passing through the 3rd mainland bridge, whether when you are coming or going. And please, if you have not, between now and before you depart, please make sure you go around the city. You'll be able to see that is the state of aquatic splendor, is the center of excellence. So I will encourage all of us. But however, so as beautiful as this state is, as beautiful as desirable as it is to live in it, we also have some challenges because it's a mega city, more than 24 million people. This is the aspect that we don't get to see on a daily basis. The major parks with people milling around all the time, the human density, the mental stress, the biological threat has always been a reality. Has always been a reality. Then the traffic issue is another big hurdle in Lagos State as of now. Average car per kilometer in Nigeria is between 15 and 20, while in Lagos it's between 150 and 200 per kilometer on the average. So which means for every time we are in Lagos, we are faced with the traffic issue as well. Then waste management happens to be another major issue that we have in Lagos State. But luckily, because of the political vision, the buy-in of the political leaders, there has been a lot of transformation. But in spite of all this one, we still face a lot of infections at one point or the other. For every fig that has been declared by WHO, We've had one or two cases in Lagos State. The only one that we didn't really have anyone was when Zika was declared. Though we had antibodies, but we do not really have an established case of Zika in Lagos State. Then we have some existing measures, which I'll just gloss over because we've been there all along. The LASEMA, emergency preparedness and response committees, the infectious disease hospital, mainland hospital, Yaba, that has been there close to 60 or 70 years now. Lasambos, the public health law is there. The integrated disease surveillance and response system has been there. Effective collaboration with ported because Lagos State happens to be a major point of entry into this country. We have the seaports, we have the land borders, we have the airports, and as I always tell people, Lagos State is only 24 hours maximum away from any major disease outbreak anywhere in the world. So when Ebola struck in West Africa in 2014, it was not whether it's going to affect Nigeria, it is when it's going to happen. And eventually it happened, and all over the world, people have already commented, commended Lagos for the way which we responded to that outbreak in 2014. But we didn't stop there. What was done after the post-EVD research, after the Ebola 2014, was that there was the Honorable Commissioner of Health then, Dr. Jide Idris, brought together a team. We call it State Ebola Virus Disease Research Initiative. And the team was to look and identify gaps in our EVD response in 2014. It was in December 2014 that the team was brought together. And because of the one major thing that the team was able to identify was the issue of absence of the state of the heart diagnostic facility for emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases, which means for every emerging or re-emerging infectious disease, we may still have to rely on laboratories within and outside Nigeria, not directly under the control of Lagos State. The absence of the public health, laboratory was a major thing. And then the State Ebola Virus Disease Research Initiative metamorphosed into B4 committee. That is biobanking, biosecurity, biosafety, and biocontainment. And the B4 committee was saddled with the task of providing solutions to the gaps identified. And luckily, the state hosted the second GETS conference in Lagos. And in partnership with GPP Canada, there was a handshake. And that was what led to the establishment of the Lagos State Biobank, which I'm just going to give a report of the timeline since the handshake, the design, and now the implementation, and to look at how far we have done concerning the COVID-19 response. That was this was the opening ceremony of the second African Conference of GETS in Lagos, Nigeria in 2016. Now, as a result of the handshake, GPP Canada was sponsored the design and the construction of the high consequence pathogen BSL-3 laboratory and biobanking unit. Another factor identified during the Ebola outbreak in 2014 was that most of the Ebola samples were taken out of West Africa. Up till now, they are still in Europe, some in America, and up till now, we do not have access to them. And so the question is, if you are talking about a valuable biological material, having governance structure over your valuable biological material, then you need to have where you will bank them. So the GPP Canada was able to sponsor the design, the construction, and installation of the facility, as well as supply of some of the equipment, while Lagos State government, with the counterpart funding, provided the capacity building of personnel, the maintenance of the laboratory, community engagement in the area where the Lagos State Biobank was situated, as well as environmental impact assessments. This is the picture of the Lagos State Biobank. Most often than not, some people, when they came, they just say, where is the lab? Where is the biobank? We said, this is the lab. They said, oh, those containers and we will laugh. They are they were fashioners of container. And it was because we look at so many factors, the issue of sustainability, the issue of being able to maintain it. We examined some of the BSS3 facilities that were available in Nigeria. Some of the facilities available in Nigeria, and we discovered that after 2 or 3 years, once the funding dries up, maintenance becomes an issue. So we wanted something that we'll be able to maintain at every given time. Then we want something that is environmental friendly. So our primary source of power in Lagos State Biobank happens to be the solar panel, 60 kVA solar panel. That is the primary source of energy. And this one is able to charge a 40 kVA inverter. So at every given time, we draw energy from the inverter. This is the solar panel is always charging. It's only if we don't have adequate sunlight that we revert back to the national grid, or we use the 100 kVA generator. Then we have an independent water supply. So the Lagos State Biobank is autonomous when it comes to power, when it comes to water, and when it comes to even to structures too. And then what makes it a BSS3 is the HEPA filtration system, the reticulated system. This is what I would call the respiratory organ of the Lagos State Biobank. With this one, we are able to filter every year that is going into the laboratory, the BSS2, the BSS3. So the BSS3 is always under negative pressure. And all this one on the lower pictures, those rectangular boxes are filled with HEPA filters that will change at regular interval so that we are able to protect ourselves as well as the community, taking into consideration the issue of biosafety and biosecurity. This is the interior of the BSS2 of the laboratory, devoid of the equipment. The BSS3, just an aspect of the BSS3, devoid of the equipment. Then what are the activities of the Lagos State Biobank? The technical training and certification of Lagos State Biobank personnel by GET Consortium as well as GPP Canada in partnership with Public Health England. So it's not only technical training, you must be certified. For every training, you do an assessment, and if you pass, then you are certified. For every member of Lagos State Biobank, for every staff, for every personnel, the technical training is a major aspect that we made sure we did. Then hands-on training on new generation sequencing was done. Attendance of conferences. I'll tell you that right from this is the 6th conference of GET, and there's not a single one that Lagos State Biobank personnel have not been fully sponsored for all the conferences within and outside Nigeria. And the essence of attendance at international conferences, the exposure as well as networking, so that we are able to bring in the best practice into the Lagos State Biobank. Then there are certification, International Federation of Biological Association, certification of biosafety and biosecurity. As of today, I'll tell you that 90% of our staffs are certified in biorisk management, and about 60 to 70% on shipment of dangerous goods by international air travel agencies. Then on biosecurity, in Nigeria as of today, there are only 3 IFBA certified experts on biosecurity, and they are all in Lagos State. They are all in Lagos State. The Honorable Commissioner happens to be one of them. The second person, you can give it to Lagos State. Lagos State is the center of excellence. The second person is Professor Den Loye in LASU, and the third person happens to be my humble self, the director of Lagos State Biobank. Then, as part of the activity in preparation for the next pandemic, bearing in mind what the B4 committee profiles as solution, 5 members of the 5 personnel were sent for 6-week training last year, November, December, in Cape Town. They were in Western Cape University, Stellenbosch University, CAF, for training, hands-on training, on molecular techniques for diagnosis of infectious diseases, PCR, Sanger sequencing, next generation sequencing, Baobab LIMS, Laboratory Information Management System, IATA certification as well. Then there's the establishment of biosecurity governance. Incidentally, the chairman of the Governing Council is present here, and other members of the Governing Council of Lagos State Biobank are present here this morning. Professor Shibogun is the chairman of the Governing Council of the Lagos State Biobank. And one of the members is also here, Professor Shade Ogunshola. Then there are policies that were developed on biosecurity, biobanking, material transfer. You cannot take anything out of Lagos State, biological, anything that is biological, without the approval of the Governing Council. Whether it is sputum, blood, whatsoever, there must be material transfer agreement, bearing in mind the issue of benefit sharing for every diagnostic kit or therapeutic agent that you develop from such valuable biological materials. This is one of, these are, okay, just pictures of the different training sections. This one was within the lab, the 5-member team that went to Cape Town last year, and the last picture was one of in which we had people from Public Health England training us. Incidentally, that was in January this year in preparation for the Lassa fever outbreak that we normally have in Lagos State, not knowing that we are going to enter another phase of outbreak that is much, much more than Lassa fever. And right in the middle there is Professor Sunday Omilabu, the principal investigator of for Lagos State Biobank. Now, what is the operational capacity of Lagos State Biobank as of March 2020? Bearing in mind that the first case was February 27th of February this year. We have, when we talk of the scientists working within the lab, there are 9. We have 2 biomedical engineers fully dedicated to the Lagos State Biobank. So for every of our equipment, the 2 biomedical engineers are there to make sure that everything functions normally. And until they give you the go-ahead, you cannot even work in the BSA2 or BSA3 until the biomedical engineer certified that it's safe to go in. So for every time they are going to operate, one of the biomedical engineers must always be on ground. Then we have an extraction capacity of about 180. And then 1 PCR machine, light cycler. And turnaround time was more than 24 hours. That was as of March 2020, and it was a lot of challenges for us because then, for every time you use the light cycler, interpretation of results becomes a major hurdle because it takes 1 to 2 hours for you to finish interpreting the run on the thermocycler. But Lagos State, because of the political buy-in, there was ramping up of capacity of the Lagos State Biobank. These are some of the activities that we did during the COVID-19 outbreak. Diagnostic, I will tell you, as of today, close to 30% of all tests that was done in Nigeria was done at Lagos State Biobank. There was a time that for every announcement that is going to make concerning new cases on daily basis, if our result is not ready, NCDC will wait for us. The occasion in which we have to call NCDC and say, our result is going to be delayed for about 1 hour, they say, we'll wait for you. Because they know by the time everybody will hear the score at the end of the day, it will always be on the higher scale because of the response. Then we were able to monitor therapeutically as many patients as possible. Then we are able to do other things as well. Okay. So another thing that we did during the pandemic was the issue of digital platform were created and tools to manage sample and data streams. We have so many portals that were created by Lagos State Biobank personnel. So we have the pre-laboratory phase, test ordering, sample packaging, and shipping, to the extent that we are able to barcode every of the sample bottles. So we got to that level during the pandemic. So Lagos State Biobank evolved gradually and met up with the rising challenge during the pandemic. We got to a stage in which we barcoded every of the samples that were coming in right from the feed. And with that, it assisted us in the analytical as well as, dissemination of results. And that promotes the meaningful use of laboratory information management system. So our role during the COVID-19 pandemics with diagnosis and follow-up of cases was done for every of these cases, even when initially when we have to do repeat testing every 72 hours before we now decided, okay, it's going to be on the 14th before the final decision that there will be no second testing. Then biobanking of VBM, valuable biological material. As of today, every positive sample that was ever tested in Lagos State in the facility is safe because we kept them under the appropriate temperature. Sputum, nasopharyngeal swabs, blood from patients, plasma, we were able to collect so that we were able to separate into various fragments, and some of them are currently being analyzed. Then samples were processed, as I've said before, close to 30% of samples tested in Nigeria was done at Lagos State Biobank. Then validation of rapid test kits for point of care testing. The Lagos State Biobank was able to look at about 7 different rapid test kits for validate them in comparing their sensitivity and specificity with PCR. Also viral propagation because of the Biosafety Level 3 laboratory, we are able to do some viral propagation as well as development of a ELISA platform, which is just about going into the stage in which we will analyze how good the platform is so that we'll be able to use that as a means of assisting the response. And apart from that, it came to a point that on daily basis, remember at the beginning of the outbreak, our daily testing capacity was only 180. But we were able to ramp up to the extent that close to 1,500 samples can be processed at the Lagos State Biobank on daily basis. And we are running a 24-hour shift. We brought in some ad hoc staff, and with that we were able to run a 24-hour shift. Then we got to a level in which we look at it. There are people who need to be tested. There are some people who just want to know their status. For those travelers and the rest, the private laboratory were brought in for COVID-19 testing. And Lagos State Biobank was saddled with training of those laboratories on sample collection, safe sample reception, IPC training, result interpretation, data governance, biorisk management, as well as biosecurity. All these ones were done for all the private laboratories that belong to the consortium that were validated and were permitted to test for COVID-19 in Lagos State. And I can tell you that with that one alone, the private laboratories have tested close to 75,000 COVID-19 samples in Lagos State. And all the laboratories were inspected by a farmer in conjunction with personnel from Lagos State Biobank. The validation of processes as well as competency test was done for all the laboratories, in which we send validation panel to them. And if the laboratory was able to perform very well, that was the only time they will sign the MOU. Now, the Lagos State Biobank happens to be the only laboratory in Nigeria that was able to ramp up as the outbreak was going on. We were able to ramp up our testing capacity. We started with only one Roach thermocycler. And at the peak of the outbreak, because of the political buy-in, we were able to get 2 biorad machines at different times, coming in at different times. And what we did at the end of the day was to name each of those PCR machines different names depending on the source of the machine. The Roach thermocycler is GETS, because it was GETS, Consortium, and GPP and the rest. The first biorad that we got, we call it Sonwo, because it was through the largesse of the governor of this state. The next one we got was called, what do we got now? The name of the Joke, yeah, we call it, that one is Joke. Then there was another one, the Applied Bio System, had another name. Then we have a Corn Studio 7 that could do 384. At any given time, you can do 300, you can run 380 samples on the Corn Studio 7. So at the end of it, we were able to ramp up our capacity from just doing 180 per run to close to 2,000 per run. Because when you put everything together, if you're able to load every one of them, you have about close to 800 samples that will be processed at a go. And if you do a 24-hour shift, we could do close to 2,500 to 3,000. So they said that at the peak of the response, because of inadequate samples, Lagos State Biobank was operating at 30 to 40% of our capacity. But the ramping up was because of the political buy-in and because of the readiness of the team at the Lagos Biobank. And these are some of the equipment that we were able to get. The Biorad, we have an automatic extractor that was able to do, I think, 90. But if you put the automatic extractor side by side with just one scientist in the laboratory, the scientist will beat that automatic extractor, will match whatever the automatic extractor is able to do. Most of them that are not, with the manual extraction, we're able to do 2,000. With the automatic extractor, the pre-loading phase is just so much that most of them we do not even use it. We just go on to use the manual extraction, so we're able to do a lot. So the automatic extractor is there. The Quant Studio 7 will not be able to use it because we require a robotic loader, because the wells are tiny, and for you to load 384 wells, you have to really it very well. So we could not use it during the outbreak. But the other PCR machines, we use them maximally. We also have a MIC. So for samples that were small in number, we will easily run them. And one thing that was very, very funny was that during the outbreak, there was a day the thermocycler, the roach, stopped working. And that was the day the first Biorad machine was brought in. And it's plug and play. So we just put it up immediately, and we were using it back to back before we got another one. I'm on the last slide. Okay. So we were able to do that one. Then what is the way forward? When you look at the success story of Lagos State Biobank as of today, because of the political buy-in, because we are able to identify the gaps concerning our response to the Ebola virus disease in 2014, then we're able to look at way forward. We're able to look for partnership. The political buy-in, we're able to get the political buy-in. The evidence of the political buy-in was the event yesterday afternoon, in which you have the governor himself being here and telling us the next stage for Lagos State Biobank and the Infectious Disease Hospital as a whole entity. It's because we have the political buy-in. So sustainability, we are looking at bioeconomy. For every of the valuable biological material there, they are what could yield money. Then vaccine development, because we can propagate the virus even in our lab, we will be able to identify some of the antigens and be able to move to the level of even developing vaccine. Now, the ELISA platform that I've spoken about is another thing that is ongoing, and that one will definitely go into PPP arrangement for commercialization of such research. Then research collaboration through grants. There have been about 4 or 5 different proposals, even from outside Nigeria, because of the extent of the Biobank, request to us that, look, this is what we want to do. How can we be part of it? In what way can we be of help? Then the creation of an agency. This slide was prepared before the Mr. Governor's speech yesterday, but we're looking beyond an agency now, and we've even gone beyond an agency, because what is Lagos State Biobank project is evolving to is an institute for infectious disease we were looking at Lagos, but the governor said we should dream big, and we started dreaming big. The African Infectious Disease Research Center. And definitely I've been, myself, Dr. Saka, the Global Executive Secretary of GETS, we are privy to some information concerning the design. And we used to tell some of our staff that, look, you are working in one BSA3, and you think you are working now. We have a facility that's coming that have more than one BSA3 facility. I won't say how many for now. The strengthening of the One Health paradigm is one of the things that we've always focused on in Lagos State Biobank. Whatever I've said now could not be possible without the support of Mr. Governor, the Honorable Commissioner of Health, and members of the cabinet, the PS, the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Health, the Governing Council of Lagos State Biobank, as well as the personnel of Lagos State Biobank. The personnel of Lagos State Biobank are here. They've been attending the conference since day one. Dr. Bankole, the lab manager, and the rest of them, they are all present here. I really want to appreciate you for the support you gave, even to me as director. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutiu. A second before you go, many of us who have been to the Biobank understand and appreciate the kind of work Dr. Mutiu is doing. I would have thought actually that his presentation would have been one of the first, quite frankly. But I just want to ask you a question. Dr. Margaret mentioned something about, two questions roll into one, please. Dr. Margaret asked something about mental health. And in many ways, she alluded to the fact that, how do we test and guarantee the mental health of those who even manage the facilities because of the security implication? The second question I'd like to ask is, in case of any natural disaster, there could be lightning, there could be flood, there could be thunder. Apart from the integrity of data, right, is there any disaster recovery strategy? Because we don't want to presume. I mean, we know where the facility is located. It is possible that access to that place, right, can be hindered. So could you please, in 30 seconds, if you don't mind. Just.
Thank you very much. Concerning mental health of the people, of those working in the biosecurity facility, during the outbreak, we had 1 or 2 sessions with the psychosocial team. And yesterday, at least half of the staff who are not here were at another psychosocial support session that was held in another place in Lagos State as of yesterday. And concerning the viability and being able, we have what we call a contingency plan, that for every event, I could tell you that throughout the period of the NSAS protest, the violence post-NSAS, we were always in the lab. We know the appropriate security agency to call. We know how we can move our samples. We know what to move them. There's a contingency plan for the viability of those samples. Thank you very much.
Applause for him. As we were talking, one of the strongest pillars in this effort, who walked in, Professor Akio Shibogu. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much. We have John Voigt, who is a guest professor at Central South University, Changsha, China. He's going to be talking about biobanking during COVID-19 pandemic. Over to you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Prof, you can.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm trying to get my slides up. Okay, is that okay? Okay, thank you. All right, I enjoyed the previous presentation about the biobanking in Lagos. I'm going to show sort of a broader view of some international perspectives of biobanking during the pandemic. In March, just as the pandemic was becoming serious in the US, I wrote a editorial for the journal that I'm editor of, Biopreservation and Biobanking. And at the time, there were already a few responses